Bona tarda. Benvinguts aquesta tarda al Col·legi d'Arquitectes de Catalunya a la 9ª conferència del cicle Europa, que ha estat comissariat pel Moisés Puente, però que avui no ens pot acompanyar degut a un problema de salut. Avui és l'última sessió d'un total de 9 conferències que amb una periodicitat aproximada d'unes 2 setmanes ens ha permès acostar-nos al panorama arquitectònic europeu de la mà de despatxos d'arquitectes i altres professionals relacionats amb l'arquitectura. Vam començar amb Office, amb Kersgers David van Severen, vam continuar amb Philips Ursprung, hem tingut l'Alexander Taillieu de Vylder, també ha estat amb nosaltres el comissari Moritz Kuhn, el Wilfried Cohen de l'estudi alemany Cohen a Malvezzi, Frick Persin de 51 Nord 4 Est, André Kempe de l'atelier Kempe-Thiel, Thomas Reynaud i per últim avui tenim amb nosaltres, thank you for coming, Jan de Vylder de l'estudi de Vylder, Vinck, Taillieu. Com sempre fem, hem demanat a un arquitecte local, d'aquí, del país, que faci una reflexió, una introducció a l'obra del nostre convidat, i en aquest cas li demanem al Tomeu Ramis de Flexo Arquitectura que ens faci aquest favor. Per acabar, com sabeu, aquest cicle ha estat esponsoritzat per Vesturs Viatges i per tant es proposava que al final del cicle es faria un sorteig per un viatge a Hamburg que quan acabem la conferència es farà aquí mateix. Dit això, cedeixo la paraula al Tomeu.
Bueno, hola. El Moisés té grip. No, res més. No, és que tenia una malaltia, és grip. Well, hello. Hi, Jan. Well, first of all, thanks Manolo and thanks Moisés, although he's not here, but just for the record, for making this possible and for inviting us to introduce architect and builder Vinck Taillieu, DVVT from now on, if you don't mind, Jan. Okay. We'll start from the beginning. Jan de Vylder, Inge Vinck and Jo Taillieu established architect and DVVT in Ghent in 2010 after studying at St. Lucas University and working at the Steffenbell office where they met between 2001 and 2006. After that period, during which they also worked independently and with other colleagues, building the House 43, for instance, or the BS House, Jan and Inge became partners in 2008 and Jo joined them 2 years later, consolidating somehow the practice as a conversation between others and beyond the individual authorship. So DVVT, as we know it today, is very young. It has just 7 years, but during this time a lot has been said, written, published and awarded about their work. They have been invited to the Orders 100 project, to the Venice Architecture Biennale, to the Istanbul Design Biennale, to the Shenzhen and Hong Kong Bi-City Biennale and to the Oslo Architecture Triennale, to name some of them. They have been singled out in the Belgian Architecture Awards in several occasions, nominated to the Biens van der Rohe Award in 2 occasions, and awarded with the Schelling Architecture Prize last year in 2016. Their work has been featured in 3 volumes, published by themselves, and in 2 important monographies, 2G Magazine in 2013, and recently in the last A+U magazine, which I strongly recommend, all of them. They have also been combining his practice with teaching at different universities, like St. Lucas University, TU Delft, or Academia de Arquitectura di Mendrisio. But besides all the official data that you can follow up on their website, we basically believe that the contribution to redefine our job is very important for different reasons, and we would like to highlight the redefinition of 3 classical architectural clichés: context, format, and production. I'll be short, so don't worry. Context. For DVVT, the context is everything, and everything is considered an opportunity to operate with. Place, client, budget, urban regulations, techniques, materials, culture, and history. They are interested in a formal strategy that considers and represents what is known and exists, so there's no hidden truth waiting to be discovered or revealed. There's no genius loci, or at least in the classical sense. Modern obsession with form follows function has been a change for an architecture, understood not as a problem-solving, but as a complex cultural artifact. Format. Like many others before them, they have had the need to develop a new drawing system to define their work. Unlike the render, understood as a representation that eliminates the possibility of thinking as doing and determines the answer beforehand, they understand the drawing as a tool to permanently approach and question the project in an open manner. Production. Unlike the modern obsession for the ideal, the clearness, the cleanness, and the honesty, DVVT find permanent opportunities in the contingent, in the ordinary, in what cannot be renderized. They choose an unprejudiced and inclusive attitude, close to the collage or the do-yourself, that doesn't discriminate between this and that, but goes for this and that. They are interested in a hybrid approach, capable of combining materials and techniques from different sources in order to establish not an alternative to a new, but a new reality. If you check carefully their website, you will find 147 projects of different scales, programs, budgets, and states, with no visible order or hierarchy between them. The small intervention for private clients in the backyard of the Flemish suburban houses, the kind of commission that most of the offices will refuse to get, are understood here as important as the bigger commissions, as an opportunity to operate with. Or, as they say, and I quote, every project is an experiment because it has its own context. In short, and I'm finishing, DVVT invites us to rethink architecture in another way, giving back to our discipline its cultural condition, an interacting discipline in which socioeconomic, technical, and political processes are brought together, and where, therefore, architecture is understood as a combination of accident, opportunism, chance, intelligence, and imagination. We would like to finish with one question and one assertion written by DVVT that we think is worth to keep in mind while attending the lecture. That strangeness, can it be introduced? And producing architecture is accepting the uncertainty. Well, thank you, and Jan, please.
Okay, thank you very much for this kind introduction, which for sure I will not be able to prove this evening. I will give it a try. I'm happy to present you the work of Inge, you, and myself. And as always, titles or subjects are asked for lectures, and then we always say about this, about that, and so on. That's where we will talk about. The lecture will show almost 9 projects. We have also like 6 miscellaneous things we've done or we are working on, and there are 3 ideas I would like to share with you. And then we have a separate chapter, which are only pictures I will show without any comment. We will see if we get to that point. So let's start with this kind of what I call miscellaneous things we are doing. And it's maybe a classic one. It is the table that we have designed for a client of us called Le Ballet de la Baie, for which we made a production house for theater and dance, like I believe it was 2008. And after a couple of years, the client gave us a call saying that in fact they were heading for IKEA. And someone of the company said, shouldn't it be an idea to call the architect so he can give his idea on the furniture for the building? And in fact, by having said that, all the premises for the furniture were given. It should be cheap. They were about to go, so it should have been made immediately. And they underlined in the telephone that they liked the idea that they easily can demount IKEA. I think it's a mistake because after 2 times demounting, it's gone. But anyway, it set us out, and we decided not to design a table, but to steal our grandma's table and to make a replica out of it in simple plywood. Cheap plywood, spruce, like you use on building sites to protect things. And then the legs were like piano legs. You could screw them out. It's a wooden screw. But to us, the beauty happened the moment that we glued together the plywood into a block to give it to the craftsman to reveal the leg of the grandma's table. And all of a sudden it seems that the layering of the plywood took over a certain nature again. And at the end, at the notes, we put it back some branches, and I don't think I want to explain anything more about it. Second thing, it's a photo I took in Mies van Rohe's Bruno Tugendhat house 1 week before it was closed for the restoration. And what you see is a beautiful handrail, chromatized. It leads you to the lower part of the house. It seemed to have been damaged throughout the history of the house. We know that this house, we as architects, we claim it as a very important production of Mies van Rohe, and it is, but we also know that this house throughout European history had a very important and interesting role. Anyway, the handrail seems to have been damaged, and someone one day seems to have felt the need to repair it somehow with a silver duct tape. I found it unbelievably interesting to see the value, the beautiness of the silver duct tape towards the beautiness of highly ended chromatized steel. It led, when we were asked for a certain gallery to present some pieces of furniture we were thinking about, one of the pieces was this. It's a black metal dish polished with diamond, like it always goes before you want to chromatize it. But then at the end, we don't chromatize it. And above, you see, and at that moment, just newly revealed steel plate to the open air. And below you see one which had been revealed like half a year into the open air, a little bit even forced humid air. But what you see is what you get. At a certain point, the steel starts to oxidate again, to start to get rusty again. And it depends, we have many of those tables sold in the meantime. If you clean it every day with a dry cloth, it stays quite mirroring. But if you forget after a party to take away the glasses of wine, you get this after that late night weekend. But to us, it reveals a beautiness. It's maybe our own small, cynical or irony regarding the idea of the need of sustainability. As traces are, we believe, part of the idea of architecture. Third thing I like to share. This is a photo taken above upon the San Gotardo on an mid-August day. And what you see is what you normally see, full of tourists, cyclists, and the mountain as such. But 1 year ahead of that photograph, I took this photograph, the same position, the same place. And as it happens, of course, that we are asked, everyone is always asked, what does architecture means to you? This photograph, to me, or the both together, start to explain something. You could say, maybe it's about a condition, a certain condition, in this case, the gray humidity around, that all of a sudden seems to connect things that have nothing to do with each other. The electricity pile, the statue, the traffic sign, the small chapel in front of the traffic sign, and the small staircases that go up. Architecture as a condition, maybe possible, a possible answer. I've shown you 3 of those miscellaneous things. I will show 3 others later on. And I introduce you, oh no, I show another one, sorry. This is a photo I took when we visited the site ahead of a competition. It's a beautiful villa in a romantic park. And the city of Lokeren, which is a small city between Antwerp and Ghent, inherited this area in the 70s, and they installed a music academy in it for children. And this academy was very successful, so they needed to be renovated, not only, but also to give extension. And I'm quite sure the success of the academy was related to these marvelous teachers around, but I'm also sure it had something to do with the romantic atmosphere of the park. And as it need to be extended, and you have to imagine a program which is like the same square meters of volumetry of the existing villa. We had made many schemes, really new versus old, and you know this kind of attempts we all do. But none of them could stay in our interest. And then 5 days ahead of the delivery, we went back to our documentation and we picked up this photograph again. And all of a sudden, we saw the black pond perfectly mirroring the villa. We made this collage in which you see the same park in winter condition, and outside next to the park another villa. And if you look to the left part of the photograph, you recognize the gestalte from both 2 villas. We drew another villa. Another villa which was first called mentally a copy, but then of course we are not artists, we are architects. We deal with precision of given program, we deal with understanding of conditions of nowadays, as for example it was impossible to beat for a reasonable price the beautiful craftsmanship of the woodwork in the old villa. But we found a way of redesigning the ornament in a possible way. And it's not literally a copy. You see that there are quite some differences, but on the other hand, if you close your eyes a little, they both seem to be twins from each other. This is a photograph of the model. Here you can see how different they are at the same sameness. The mayor, who was part of the jury, didn't want to pay us, as he said he didn't got a new building, and he thought we were laughing with him. So now the projects. I've given you 4 first ideas, the projects, 9 projects. I'm a little bit slow, I have the feeling today. We'll see where we end up. This is a corridor of an old abbey, and the client bought this abbey with the idea to make an open landscape office of it. This is, of course, contrary to the nature of that building. Luckily, on one hand, the monumental services, of course, made immediately clear this was impossible. On the other hand, when we went a little bit more on research into the building, we found out that between corridor and the rooms next to the corridors, the wall which was present seems to have been not an original one. What was the real original status was not really clear, but anyway, the walls had been maybe replaced, we don't know. Anyway, look what you see above the blue window. You see a kind of blue color that was revealed when we were dismantling the wall in between corridor and room. So finally we replaced those brick walls with glazed walls, sliding doors, sometimes closed or fixed, but mostly sliding. We had to add some extra constructive elements. The glazed walls were in aluminium, which you normally would expect brut aluminium. The beams were expected to get a color also, but we decided not to find out an own color scheme, but to carefully check every room and discover in every room another color we took as the leitmotif for that part of the building. It was important for us that all our interventions, which had seemingly nothing to do with each other, all of a sudden had something to do with each other. The aluminium, which is a partition wall, the construction parts, which are in metal, but just by adding, or just not even adding, by picking up, transcribing the color from the rooms to the intervention, it's like the intervention became part of the history, at least our opinion. And the old doors in between the rooms, they stay like they were. And maybe at certain points of use, when you open the doors and you slide away the walls, you might have that feeling they were longing for from the beginning, having a connecting between the different workspaces, but differently than just one open office space. Second project. This is a kind of painting collage we made. It is a project, I will come back to this painting later on. It's a project for a psychiatric clinic near to Ghent, and this is an old picture of it. It has been invented starting 19th century. It was ahead of its time at that time, because at that time psychiatric diseases or treatments were not very high leveled and mostly lead to almost jailing people. Anyway, this is a new scheme which has been introduced at that time, and it was like, we call it in the meantime, beautiful old villas spread out in a park in which all the different diseases were separately treated, but also secondly, everything was free. People could walk out, could walk around in the park, and it gave at that time a very new feeling. But then came, of course, the second half of 1950, 1960, and they quickly started to demolish villas, to replace them by, you see this kind of footprints, new types of new hospitals with typical hospital plan layouts, and each other building was some different architecture. Currents all throughout the area seems to have to get lost. There was a young director entering this space like almost 3 years ago, maybe only 2 years ago. And when he arrived, he was confronted with that architectural heritage. And he is not only a good director in psychiatry, but seemingly also somewhat with a feeling for architecture. So he was astonished about the ongoing demolishing of those villas, like we call them. And at that time, they were demolishing this one when he arrived, and they just started to take away the roof of this one. He immediately stopped that and said that he, of course, understood that those villas could not beat up with nowadays regulations, but he asked to his team to go with him in an idea of thinking that therapy could be different in this type of buildings than in the so-called regulated buildings. So he convinced his team to launch a new competition and to ask, although this was almost demolished, to ask in that competition to architect teams, what can you do with it? Surprise us. Don't go back to what is expected normally, do something with it. You're allowed to demolish it further on, but give the place a meaning. And secondly, in the brief of the competition was mentioned that he was longing to find a way to reconnect the buildings all through the landscape, not in physical way, but in mental way, like all the villas used to do earlier. That second question I first will explain you. What did we do? We went back and we made a catalog of all the buildings around. And we catalogued them in a very specific way. We went looking to some potential graphical interference between buildings. You see now all types of buildings, you recognize old ones in between or old ones that have been adapted already or the new ones. And at first you might not have the feeling that they have something to do with each other. But our second part of the proposal was to reconnect them by emphasizing what you see here at the second one, that is that all the old villas seems to have had beautifully white painted loggias. So the introduction we did was to dismantle, that's the idea, to dismantle in all those different buildings parts so that loggias could return by just painting them white, and throughout the old park a new architectural connection was able to be found back. And that's what is shown in this painting so far. In the middle you see that villa we work on, and left and right, on the right side you see an old villa which had an extension in the 30s, and then we open it just as a loggia. And on the left side you see a flat building from the 50s. We proposed to take away windows to keep it just as a covered outdoor space. That was the second part of the competition. The main part of the competition was of course regarding this old villa, and this is the model we entered. It's a kind of puppet house size. We entered to make the competition, and of course you recognize already that also in addition to that villa from the 50s, we cleared out by taking away the windows and the window sills and the upstands below to have a new loggia again. But on the other hand, you also see that this model is in fact a status quo of how we found the building. Roof tiles were taken away, and that's the proposal. We kept it like that. We proposed that we should not further on demolish the building, but that we should dismantle it. We should make it free for the use in nature, so no roof, it would rain inside. So we proposed some rooms, not to take them away, but to take some floors away so that a new nature could take part of the building, and also new use could take part of the building. We did it with model. We did it also, maybe a little bit overlighted, with many of sketches of walks we did through the building, and how you could take away a floor, and how you could add a greenhouse, and how you could add green, and how you could make of this building a building that could act as an open place at the same time still somehow as a building. We went through a whole process, not only with the director and its team, but also with the patients. We did many, I would not say therapy meetings, but meetings with all the people together to talk about it and to draw on site. Even I had the ability to draw with a young student architect who lived almost yet 5 years at that place. And this is the result today. It's a typically Flemish day, a little bit grey. And if you come close, you recognize the first loggia, the white one. And then you go in it, and you will see that the floor is disappeared. It has been replaced by a natural grind. We took away all the plasterwork so that it cannot start to rot, and all the ceilings are gone inside. And as the building was damaged, since they started the demolition already, we introduced for the contractor a certain way how to deal with all the damages throughout the whole project. We gave them kind of rules to replace all what was damaged, like linings and whatever, to replace it in this way. We walk in it, we find another greenhouse, which has to become the real greenhouse, the winter garden. That's why it's so high. You see the original metal beams coming through it, so situating the formerly known floor. We turn to the left. You see that the roof is open, it rains inside. The green beams again, they were there, we just painted them green. And an ordinary street light, which is all around the park, is introduced into the building. We look further on, we walk through the building. You see the way how we have cut it to beams, ceilings are gone. When it rains through. And when it was raining, we were walking around with a huge drill of 10 centimeters to make the holes that every the water. We do a yearly, and we did now the first yearly checkup of the building. And throughout the next years, it might happen that we will further on dismantle the building or might change things. Like, for example, we agreed on moving out this greenhouse here below to the outside as they want to use that place in a different way. You can visit this space also just as public or as architectural freak and go and sit there day and night and meet the people. You might meet people wanting to talk to you. Sometimes you might see that the floor we took away between basement and ground floor here delivers a kind of small auditorium, that there is happening some talk, some activity. It's all very unpredictable. So when I arrive, I never know what's going to happen. But anyway, they found themselves a place, it seems, that's the way they told it, or they explained it to me, a place where them all, also especially the therapists and the doctors, have been confronted with thinking about new ways to talk with people. New ways on how on Sunday afternoon parents come over there and visit their children and go out and sit there and maybe in the early season and the last season make the fireplace burn and sit around and drink hot chocolate milk. This is the way we treated the building, and if I say treated the building, it's because the doctors called it like that, healing the building. You had an old electricity line going up and down here. We stitched it together. We opened the upstand below the window to have a fluent passage, and you see a second loggia, as this old villa was a classic symmetric villa. We had one found on one side. We installed a kind of graphical loggia on the other side to give the building two faces. And then, as I said, we took away windows and window sills and the upstand under the window. And then we had to restore it. We restored it with concrete. We just roughly form casted it and then we painted it white like a cloud. Even when the baluster was missing, it was only replaced by a concrete brick wall. Third project. This is a house, and the client came to us saying that they were happy with the house they bought, as they had bought a house with concrete floors and concrete walls. But as we came along, we pointed them to the fact that when you jumped on the concrete floors, they were moving like hell. And that finally the concrete walls were not that much concrete. They were a kind of prehistorical concrete block with not too much capacity. So the first thing we said to them is that unfortunately it's concrete. We need to help the house a little, to enforce the house a little. And they were very surprised after their trauma on concrete that we proposed a scheme in concrete blocks again. Those are pictures taken at the building site. And for example, this picture shows exactly what we are doing. We wanted to reinforce a house with concrete blocks, but in any way. Beams, columns, doors you close, walls you open. And if we wanted to do it in any way, it was because we loved the graphical aspect of this way those concrete blocks, together with their typical texture, come together. If we had to reinforce the floor, we added some beams crossing in the middle, again an act of graphical ambition, but also how those beams were hung up into the walls the walls were reinforced by an extra element. And this is the final result. You have a house with like expected white ceilings, white walls, but every point you can reread the original status of the house versus the new ambition of the house. One had a larger door between kitchen and dining room today. We made it smaller to have a nicer proportion between the two spaces. We needed an extra beam above as also to reinforce the opening of the old staircase to above. It arrived to happen like this. Doors needed to change from position. Walls needed to be reinforced. Bringing things together that seemingly have nothing to do with each other. Project number 4. This is a house for which we are not responsible for the brickwork. It's a house that has been bought by our clients. It seems to have been built late 60s, beginning 70s. And so the previous landlord built himself a house, and one could say only thing that this landlord was really not interested in his context. You see on the left and on the right side, in the city center of Antwerp, beautiful bourgeoisie housing. You see that the red house, his house, has this kind of strange knick due to the fact that two streets are coming together more in a triangular way. And then he made himself floor-ceiling heights as he only needed, and he stopped the house possibly when the money was run out, and that delivered him a house in which he could live, but maybe the nice thing even, ohne Eigenschaften, without any characteristics. So our client bought the house, having to deal with no garden. The house had no garden. It was a strange plot. It had no backyards, just some balconies. The client had some money. The basement garage was not part of the deal, and they only had the door on the left to go up. Bringing everything together, budget, ambitions, garden, and possibilities of the plot, we decided to propose half a house, to give back half a garden. But finally, by the half house, we could build up the house higher, and maybe in a very small ambition, bring back some lining regarding the gutter line of the house to the left, and so on. You talk in this house merely about this garden. We added the trees which you see. We walk up the house, and above, under the roof, you can see there is a small terrace, and on that small terrace you can see the top of the trees yet. This is the way when you bend slightly over the baluster and you look a little bit down. And that's what we've done. As I said, it was a strange house, so even the right side of the house, the rooms were tapered towards 2 meters. We took away the slabs, and from the second level on we made a garden with real trees. We kept parts of the slab so that all the walls were staying together structurally wise. And as those slabs, you can guess, were far too thin and far too impossible to pick up the capacity of the trees, we made a construction not by placing beams under the slabs, but by pulling up the weights, you can see it on those black lines, with metal, pulling it up and again spreading it out back towards the walls. Constructively wise, by taking away weight, we lost weight. By pulling back weight on the walls, we reconstructed the weight needed for keeping the balance into the building. Some people call our construction the other trees. But on the other hand, one arrives to have a picturesque garden unexpectedly into the city, and some old trees which were at the landscape designer's warehouse, one could say, no one wanted to buy because they were so ugly and no one knew how to use them, we could use pulling them strangely oblique way through the window. Doing sometimes the things halfway, it's not too bad. Another project, a large-scale project of the competition we have won. It would have been the largest project in our office if they would not have cancelled the project after we had won it. That's, of course, architectural reality. What you see here is a conceptual drawing. A drawing of which you could guess that you make this at first moment. I can tell you this drawing had been made by a collaborator that last night we were printing the documents and he had to wait, and out of annoyment he resumed the project in the sketch. The next morning when I arrived, I asked him to urgently and fastly change the front page by his sketch, because it's really capturing the whole idea. This is the project. This is an old military plot in the middle of the city of Ghent called Leopoldskazerne. It has been built out of the residues of the old castle, which was on the other side of the street. And it's a very eclectic building. And strangely, all the buildings are separately from each other, possibly because of military concepts. The province of East Flanders bought the whole plot as it wanted to bring down its all spread out, centralize all its spread out administration all over the province and the city towards this huge plot. But there was a kind of opposite in their ambition. They bought this plot, but then they said like, yeah, but actually we want to have one building in which all the program is connected in one building. So they included in their competition brief that it was expected that we would demolish some of the buildings, saying, in fact, as they are eclectic, they are not really under interest of monumental services. So we could demolish some of the buildings to replace it by one new building, and then to launch plans like housing and living into the residue old buildings. We have been working on that scheme for many weeks, until a moment Inge came on the table with a Ledoux book, and we saw a scheme, Salière, that came in our mind. And after we finished the complete project as expected, a new building, we sent it to the office because we were abroad, and 1 hour later we called the office saying like, stop it, we have a new scheme. We were not that far of the time of delivery, so certain stress was around, but we were totally convinced about the scheme. And what was the scheme? Not the new building, but only this bridge. This bridge which connected the first levels of the old building, but connected it directly, and the aim was to give it the idea that mentally the first level would be the below level, and from the first level on you only had to go up one level down, and everything was connected. We were proud to hand in and to win this competition thanks to the model we made, but also thanks to those drawings we made. Like, for example, this is a drawing from the old entrance hall of the old building, having taken away the floor, having kept some passages, and when you enter that space, you have to the left and to the right 2 staircases on the drawing. You go up to that passerelle, and from that passerelle you enter that bridge that gives you this view over the terrain. You go to the left, you go to the right, and you see on the opposite side of the drawing the other building. And in between, you see the new green area. If you would walk down in the city park, you would reveal a tiny metal bridge floating over this very wet land, we would make it. And that's how we connected everything without demolishing anything, or not mainly anything. We were very happy winning it, not only because of this gesture and idea of how you can go along, but of many other ideas we shared in it. We worked together with Doorson Interior Architects. And when we were there in the first moments visiting the building before we had to end in, we made a catalogue of all kind of graphical items into the building. Strange things no one could explain, but maybe also things that became strange as you frame it in a certain way. And after that, we made a kind of catalogue of forms that came in our interests, forms that could help us to work in the building when once again, like in the office building I've shown, the topic came on the table, how can you make this building open? Because once again, the floor plan was a corridor with rooms. Because in their brief, in their new building, they expected again landscape designs. And this is the way we would have liked treating it. You're in a corridor again, you need to open it for landscape, but you open it by, of course, the wall between corridor and room by taking it away, but not completely. The wall between the corridor and the room was mainly a central door and 2 windows, but this is the way we like to design, let's say, the beam. Not only a beam, but a certain drawing related to certain moments we observed in a certain way in the building. And columns were needed, but those columns, as you can see them, they are far too fat. But we liked them as a kind of way of dividing the space, as a kind of way of dealing with certain given graphics that we just found around in the building. This is a model of such an open landscape area in which we believed you still feel the history of the building, but you also fulfill, and in an unexpected way, the demand of the client. As said, the competition held by the Vlaams Bouwmeester, as we won it, it was stopped during the negotiations as they cancelled the project and they went to the capital market, let's say, to ask private investors to make the project for them. That's life. A small addition, we are almost about to finish. I mean the addition, not the lecture. This is Flanders, as you might know it. Main buildings here in the back of the photographs and a lot of additions. And in this case, there is a strange twist between the front building and the back building. I don't know why. But it was a very long building that came behind. It has like 4 rooms before you finally reached the garden. We decided to take away the roof of the last 2 rooms to make the original kitchen close to the garden. And honestly, I'm not yet ready with the perfect way on how to explain the decisions we took. One could say, are they not just only formal? Maybe it could be. We enter the first new garden room, in which we leave the faience like it is. We replace a certain ceiling by a white painted, and we leave the above roof as the above roof. We just precisely did the intervention. Some more details need to be added here, like in those niches, some mirrors. But then it's finished, a new door for the now outdoor toilet. But then only this. And coming back to the idea of whether the decisions were only about form, I could say maybe they were not about form at all, but they were about daring to taking away parts which has also constructive meaning. Like above the door here, the wooden beams were broken, we took them away, and this is of course the natural fall or the natural way of how arches work. We took away the old plasterwork, and what you see right now is not that far away from the final result. On the left side, we have a beautifully varnished cupboard in glass, of which we took away the backside, but we recently installed back the beautiful shutters in glass. But then, on besides some overrunning lines of electricity and sewage and also on, this is the space how the client got it. And you see here, left above, we took away a part of the floor because there is an above level where the bathroom will be installed to give it the Vylder going up to above. The door is slightly open and you look down right now to the kitchen room below. Now the door has been cut today in two parts. The below part is fixed and the above part is open so that no kids can fall through it. And this is the bathroom, only missing the bath and the sink and a special door to hide some washing machines. And this is the blue ceiling and the triangular roof light giving light into the Vylder. Unfortunately, I have no photos about. And maybe to finalize the look to the project, you might have seen on the photographs windows of different colors. We liked to keep the original windows which were varnished, but with thin glazed. You thermically see you cannot do anything with it. So we added new windows which were added to the outside of the house. And each window has another color. Even each window has 3 other colors, referring to colors that we picked up in the detail of the window. It delivers a very of the house. It delivers a very colorful appearance of the house, but it is in fact only related to the colors we found around in the house and we reintroduced into the windows, covering and helping us to give the house a thermal condition of nowadays expectations. These are photographs of a project of an old villa. A beautiful old villa, in fact in its original status, but this is the status how we found the villa. And there used to be a beautiful open loggia which seems to have been closed throughout the decades. The actual owners do not know the exact history. Even in this state it had a romantic feeling. But okay, this loggia was totally to be replaced because it was about to fall out of each other. And on the other hand, they wanted to have an extension on the house with a kitchen. And when they showed us around, they showed us also photographs of the original status once when they were not sure. And then you see the loggia was open. But you see also something nice. On this closed facade, you see on this one with the cement tiles, there seems to have been drawn one moment, a kind of extension of the loggia had been painted on the wall. This is another photograph of a long time ago. Finally, we built this. We replaced the original loggia on the right side in a newer version, a kind of transcription. And we, motivated by that drawing, we made the second one, being the kitchen. And the wall that was covered with cement tiles, we took the cement tiles away as they were asbestos cement tiles, and we repainted the original wall in a certain grey we found back, and we repainted the cement tiles on it this time. And those are the two loggias. Left hand the kitchen, and on the right hand the loggia, as it was expected to be an extra space. You can look at it from this side, you can look at it from the other side. It's quite equal. That's what I told about the wall. And when you go inside, all of a sudden, by having those two loggias left, right, the total corner, the corner of the house opens itself totally towards the garden. And if you want to know something about the blue column, it's not even a column, it's a gutter line from the roof above. But maybe now I start to explain too much, as I believe that just what you see can be fairly enough to enjoy the space. It leads us to another small project we built a couple of years ago for a family, a young family that inherited a house, and they inherited this house far too young in their life because they had no money to recover the house. They had only 90,000 euros at that time, like 5 years ago. So we made a deal with them that we would make a project that they could build themselves, so that the value was mostly material value. Of course, some contractors needed to be around, but finally we were successful in building this house for 100,000 euros, or let's say refurnishing. And how we did it, I will explain in any minute. We made a new house in the house, loose from the existing walls, except one wall, which we really liked. We touched, and so we had to insulate it, and so we had to cover it with our beloved cement tiles. But as this was a beautiful brick wall, we did not just wanted to cover it without or forgetting what is behind. So we decided with the client to draw the existing brick wall on the tiles themselves. A huge effort, which probably only 1 to 5 persons will see when you pass or you arrive at the house. But mentally, for us all, especially for the client, we're doing it a couple of weekends, drawing tiles, bricks on tiles. And this is a condition when you arrive at, if you know something about cycling and you know something about the Ronde van Vlaanderen. This is the start point of the Koppenberg. That's where the course or the cycling tour starts to be really tough. And this was formerly an old cafe. And as you can see, we did not change too much to the original house, except that side wall. But we restored it on the inside. And of course, one needs a new roof. So we replaced the roof also because, contrary to its history, attics were attics at that time. Attics are today places to live. So we had to add some roof lights, and not this kind of flat roof light of which I will not name the brand, but we copied the trompe-l'œil window from the first level towards the roof light with a real window, but we mirrored out the sidings of the dormer so that visually the roof kept on continuing. Inside the house, I have to say nothing was anymore worth to be kept. So we made themselves a new floor plan with new heights, loose in the house, and it was constructed with formwork called Doka, Swiss one, and they could make it themselves as a Meccano. And then we added greenhouse walls. You can close in the winter, or you can open in the summer, or whenever you want, but at any time in the house, you have the whole idea of the house back. You can have light from above, you can have sides to the non-heated place, and in the middle you have a kind of one stove that heats the whole house as far as it needs to be heated, because of course in nowadays terms I could start to talk about the very interesting climate condition with this space around. That's the way we talk about architecture today, but it's not in our interest. Our interest is the way how you feel the space. And then you can see traces like, for example, that concrete beam that you see running around, which is in fact the height of the previous old floor. And we casted the beam with the planks of the floor. I could tell you many of those other small details around in the building, but I believe this is very important in making architecture, keeping attention to those kind of small tactile opportunities around. More in my interest than talking about building physics is the position of the central chimney towards the position of the previous chimney into that enlarged corridor. I think 2 more projects to go and then some miscellaneous stuff, but it's a large one. This is an old townhouse of Ledeberg, which was a small communal next to the city of Ghent, but since the 70s part of the city of Ghent. You can call it a district of the city of Ghent. And what you see is not what you get. You look to a seemingly very beautiful neoclassic facade. By that you might imagine that you're confronted with a very stable building. But in Ghent, in general terms, the buildings are not so well built like I see, for example, here in Barcelona. So what happened throughout the history is that someone one time bought 5 houses and glued a kind of neoclassic facade in front of it and called it from then on the townhouse of the city of Ledeberg. But when we came over there and we visited the building, we found out that the building, except the facade, was really in a bad status. It was a competition. Until the competition, the building was housing a huge theater place, and that's good to understand, that run from one side of the building towards the other side of the building. Honestly, structurally wise, possibly there were like 100,000 angels keeping up the building all time, because I could not understand that it was still standing. And when we won the competition and we went back, and I heard of one of the responsibles of the city of Ghent that carnival, as Ledeberg is very wide known for this cultural carnival, was taking place with 800 people jumping up and down the floor of the first level. I insisted that the mayor should close down the building immediately, that we were not responsible, that's what you are as an architect, for eventual. So they closed down the building. So we won the competition. What was the brief of the competition? I go to a little bit schematic story. You see the front building below, which is kind of, keep on remembering this kind of bowl. And what they wanted in it was, of course, the restoration of the theater place, some administration of the city of Ghent, but also a police department in it for 30 policemen. And they suggested that, as they did found out that the volumetry, their opinion, was not large enough to inhabit all the program, they suggested that you could build in the small courtyard behind it another building for the police. We found that kind of pity, and we went to a kind of better research in understanding the building, and we found out that there was, of course, a basement they didn't took in account. They didn't took in account the attic neither, as they thought it was impossible to reach since you have a theater place in the middle, and it was never reachable ahead. And between the below level, the ground level, and this theater place, there was a kind of in-between level which was not so high, so possibly you could not use it. We went back and we proposed to puzzle the whole program into the given volume, so that in fact the outside, the backside area could stay as open as possible. Let's say there were some old buildings we like to keep, and we kept, but we did not replace it by a totally new building for the police service. The police service arrived on the height of the attic. They had a front office below, or they got a front office below, but the main back office is under the attic space. And please remember this kind of triangular incisions, as we were not allowed, and even not wanting ourselves, to add dormers, since monumental services were really interested in this facade. We made some triangular incisions, and I will show you any minute what this means. On the other hand, keep on remembering that there is a theater place from the height of the balcony, but if you look right now to the picture already, you might see some strange things, like for example, that the balusters on the windows are quite high. Why? As the building didn't have any good structure anymore, we needed to bring in a new structure in the building. We called it the table. It's like a pile of tables up on each other, because of course, since the mixed use, but also since the dense use with people around, we needed to have really huge floor packages, acoustically wise, structurally wise. When they had before a floor package of 18 centimeter, we had to deal with floor packages of 60 centimeter. And what you see here, if you have a close look at it, you see a lot of legs of the table. But if you have a really close look at it, you might discover that all the legs have different dimensions. We asked the engineer to give for each moment in the building the precise dimension that was needed structurally wise. And there started for us a new story of a certain ornament. An ornament in which we could say that, for example, we had to cross over areas which are below and the column could not go down. We could have used a metal beam in between, but we used a concrete one just because we wanted to find a new graphical way to represent construction into the building. And in that corner you can see precisely what happens. You have a very tiny column in the middle, and then a little bit larger, the largest one at the corner, and then below they get fatter and fatter when you go lower into the building. Like really the expression of the construction, but arriving towards a perception of a certain aesthetic quality. You can see it also in this point. And above the columns we added a small mirror, like the old ornaments of columns do, but in the opposite way around. It detached instead of attaching. But why I included this photograph is about something else. You see there a red spot. It was concrete, and we can agree with each other that the quality of the concrete was not the best effort of the contractor. Ah, what's happening? This photo disappears. There is a photo in between that all of a sudden disappears. Go back, check. It's gone, sorry. It's not the best effort of the contractor, and my client, who is a public client, in that case reacts by saying, we don't pay it, you have to redo it again. And the contractor, which is not a private person, it's not a public person, but a private investor, says, you can guess we're going to do it. So where does this arrive? This means that you get your building site will going to take longer as no one wants to move, and finally those things end up to court. And we looked to that kind of spot, which was actually a kind of concrete milk that came in between, they call it like this, that came in between the formwork and the concrete, and it was like a tiny thing, and also there you had it. And we said at a certain moment, what if we emphasize it instead of getting disappointed in it? And there was a strange coincidence. The main brand color of the contractor was red. The old flag of Ledenberg was red and white. And the political direction in the city of Ghent is left. So we took it as an unexpected move into the building. Later on, there came a subcontractor gluing his plan onto the concrete wall. We said, watch out with the traces of your tape. He said, no problem. Later on, we had designed a bar which had to be in another space, but finally those who wanted to, who will exploit the bar, wanted to have that bar into the space. So we, all of a sudden, the white bar, we painted it red. On the left side, the red, the architect had forgotten an acoustic kind of casting away of the rain drains that came through it. So we painted it red. And in the corridor of the staircase, some column was not really well done, and we painted it red. And we came at the height of the police services, where now you can see how this triangle incisions organized an open workspace a little bit with meeting rooms and corners behind, but a lot of light in between. Well, the contractor of the wooden windows made a mistake at the corner, so we painted it red. And then finally this beam is not a mistake, but I just liked to paint it red at the end. Finally, it let us discover once again that architecture is not led by aims and by prefigurated ambitions or results, but needs to be led by the everyday coming in realities that happens not only at the drawing table, but also on the building site. And when we had to pass some window parts as provided with a black panel where techniques of constructions had to provide, we just gently painted them red. As it became a new leitmotif, starting from a bad experience, turning over towards really just a nice element of people sitting down there today and ask very often, what's the meaning of the red? And we said to the inhabitants that they never should explain it. I explained the table, I explained the coincidence of making buildings, and maybe now I have to explain how it comes that we were able to avoid an extra building, but of course, we have to be honest, we had to add some building to make, for example, the above attic reachable for police. There were no elevators in the building, there were no escape stairs in the building, and as I pointed to this round part of the building, it gives us a leitmotif which leaded to this back side of the building. In fact, the original building had a depth of 20 meters, but the real original historical one was only 40 meters. So we took away 6 meters from the status as we found. So we gained place, and motivated by the historical importance, it's again a photograph that leaves, that's strange. Well, the historical given of that old room that we needed to respect, because I have to say there were some rooms in the building that we really needed to keep like this. We motivated it and saying like, well, it's true, at some point we have to add some program. We cannot add in the building mainly circulation, staircases and elevators. So we just added, like that only room, as separate volumes, one next to each other. And the materialization is contrary to the white building. It's just the same black tiles as the roof tiles are around. And this delivered this, like this round volume on the right side, which is in fact an escape staircase, or this fat concrete column together with the left elevator going to the entrance of the theater place, but only by those structural elements. And then finally at the end, throughout the work site, of course, this outside space was used as job site space. There was a wall, which was a garden wall, and it was broken down like this to keep the original garden wall upright, and it needed to be replaced still by something else, but we asked the contractor to keep it like that and to paint it only red. The same on the other side. And then this kind of small lamppost, René Marguerite. The last project, and then some miscellaneous stuff. It's a project we work on today for the city of Charleroi, and it is as far the largest scaled one we are working on. What you see is an historical photo of the site. It is an expo site of 60,000 square meters in the middle of the city of Charleroi. And as they built it, they in fact disconnected the above city with the landscape around. And what you see, the mountains, are the terrals. It's in fact the waste of the metal industry in which Charleroi was so important for so long. They were world leader in the 60s, so that's why they give themselves an expo space of 60,000 square meters to show off, that was the plan, to show off every year their power in metal industry. And the building is 3 levels high, and each level is 8 meters height. And what you see is a construction site photo, and you can see on the left side 3 stories of expo space, and on the right side the shed roofs. And in the middle they were constructing the so-called lobby space, which is in fact 15,000 square meters at its own. And this photograph inspired us for the competition, because for the renovation they only had 30 million euros, which sounds a lot, but which is 3 times too less to recover the whole space. You need at least 1,000 square meters. This is another photograph in which you can see the up city and the low city, and how it was disconnected thanks to the works. This is a model of our proposition. In fact, we do the same as this photograph of the building site was situating. On that photo you could not see yet facades of the middle lobby building. Our proposal is to tear down the existing facades which are there today. So we avoid the need of the investment, because that was the question of the competition, to update the architecture of the central part in a kind of nowadays architecture. We propose to not do that, and to just take away the facades, so that finally the building becomes back open again, and the building somehow starts to reconnect the up city and the lower city. And we don't need techniques, we don't need anything at all, we just have covered space to walk from the one expo building to the other, because one has to know 60,000 square meters. When the building was delivered in the 70s, the whole economy went bankrupt, and it has never been used for what it was provided, and it has been used only maybe 10 times since then in its capacity of 60,000 square meters. That's why we emphasize to the client to understand that he does not need that building, and that it's much more brave to open the building to its surrounding than to start to restore it for in fact of no need, for in fact because they got the European money. So now there will be one part of the building still expo space, the other part will become partly expo, partly parking. They can do with it what they want, but it does not need any technical treatment, and the middle space will be like this, a kind of large enjoyable space in which also trees and parks will be included, and all kind of things can happen around. Unexpectedly changing the idea of the client is possibly one of the other obsessions we live with at the office. Okay, we are almost there. I wanted to finalize the 6 miscellaneous things. And this comes not maybe strangely behind this Charleroi project that I came to present. It's a gallery in Antwerp that invited us to present some pieces of furniture and objects. And that's how a gallery space always is, wide, open, you like it, light, wow, it's for you. But after visiting it 3 times, we felt that the space, the architecture of the space, we could not understand. It's not that the engineer did not do good work, it does not collapse the space. But if you look to the quality of the space, there is something missing. How could you position your objects? So we went back to the gallerist and we said, like, there is something wrong with the space. We think the space needs some more columns to bring the space back to a space one can use. You have an arcade around and you have a space in between. The gallerist refused the concrete ones, so we had to make a decor. And finally, we made the decor in an ironical way, because we used this kind of stamps you use for building sites as a kind of ironing of the wooden box we placed around. And honestly, a lot of people, when they arrived, they felt that there was something different, but they could not point immediately at it, what was changed. The same gallery, another room, when we met it the first time, it's a room outside the gallery, a special room. The gallerist said to us, don't worry, those are traces of the show of Hannes van Severen and Fien Muller. we will paint it white. And we asked not to do it. We said, keep those traces, we love them. And make, as this is an outside room of the real gallery, make something special out of it. And we proposed that this would be a cabinet space in which every guest adds something. And as the traces of Hannes and Fien were still there, we used them to add some small cupboards into the room. Like the red one, we made a small door above, so you can put your bottle of red wine in it and cover it. In the green one, we put a kind of small cupboard into the floor where you can hide your jewelry or other important stuff. And then in this strange trays there above, we proposed that you could hide your black-rated videos or something as away from the kids. The idea is context, again, like in Charleroi, or like with the columns, or like the many other projects. How can you deal with something you are facing with, which people seems to like to pull away, but we love those traces from the beginning. This is the very first project I ever made with a friend, Patrick Moyersoen, and it's a drawing on checkered paper, but the light keeps away the checkers. And it's a collage. It's a white villa in the suburbs of Brussels, and the better suburbs of Brussels, the richer ones, large gardens, white villas, nice cars. And there's a young man inheriting it from its parents. And this young man came to us and he said, like, young guys, I have the job of your life. I want to enhance my villa because it's too small. And it was clear he was a young man, he didn't have a family, and he was planning to keep it like this for a while. And we found it a little bit strange that this villa was not large enough. The only thing we could say that the ceiling floor height was quite low, that's true. So we proposed, back into the 90s, our first job when we came from school, we proposed to dig out the house, and it had a full basement, and to take away the floor in between the basement and the ground floor, dig it out, there was enough garden, and to have the same square meters, but with another proportion of space. This client laughed for half an hour, and then half an hour we were back at the front door, and we lost, of course, this job of our life. Every young architect is dreaming of to get it immediately leaving school. And for a long time we didn't got any job. But on the other hand, it was like we were happy. Okay. 3 ideas I promised you. This is a work of the artist Ante Timmermans, one of my favorites. And the Dutch op het spel zetten is translated in the French mettre en jeu. And it means that you always have to take the risk. Second is a statement or a saying of Francis Alice. He is an artist, a Belgian artist living in Mexico City, raised as an architect. Sometimes doing something poetic can become political, and sometimes doing something political can become poetic. You hardly can imagine that you would combine words politic with poetic. And then the last one, it's a very interesting. I took this photograph when I graduated a little bit later. It's in an old gallery in Ghent that was abandoned. It's a huge house, we call it in Ghent proportions a city palace. And you have here the entrance where the porches passed by in early days. The gallery drew at that time a silhouette drawing onto the wall. So then the building was sold to a new landlord, and he installed 23 student studios in this palace and asked the electrician to install doorbells and a light switch. So he did. It's maybe the murder on an art piece, but I think it's much more fascinating than that. So this is in fact the end of the lecture. On behalf of them, if you still have time, but we can stop here, the 21 other projects, well, I will not talk about, but just show. We did the same mistake as the electrician and cut out the silhouette drawing from our picture and folded it into a bus stop. A small house. A kindergarten next to a church, dealing with the graphic of the church, but also the idea of the house. And in between, a small street to play. Almost about to deliver. New elderly housing. Elderly housing, the new Flemish topic. A delivered office space with work of Benoit van Innis, artist. Delivered last week in south of Italy, an enoteca in Matera, into the caves, grottos, spaces, citernes of the old Matera city. We just added staircases all over the places to walk down and to sit on. Large-scale housing into a beautiful park near to Brussels, Groot Bijgaarden, near to an abbey, in which the detail of the architecture of the old abbey inspired us to organize a catalogue of details going around beating with the Baroque details of the old abbey. Almost a classic, a villa around 3 trees, into a garden, not cutting down any tree, and the drawing of 17 windows only making the villa. Drawings and facades of the production studios for Le Ballet de la Baie and Musique Lot, for which we made the table, and a first tryout of diverse constructions and diverse dimensions as a way of making the facade. A veterinary clinic, no money, because all the money needs to go to the equipment, but simply changing materials and giving contractors kind of rules how to connect different materials towards the idea of ornament. Still enjoying the small projects like changing an interior, closing down the original opening and pulling away the original walls like stone falls. Small houses still, with pleasure of constructing, detailing, showing, enjoying space. Even the replacement of an old light switch caused damage, but delivers maybe simple beautiness of white traces throughout the building. Or simply taking away a floor into a shop to connect the different levels of the shop and give a kind of ambience throughout the building. Constructing with pleasure, doing middle-aged things in nowadays transcribed detailing. Or this is not a photograph of Philippe Dujardin, our beloved photographer who made all the photographs we have been looking at, but the reality of the refurnishment of a large square farmstead into a large square or large luxury house. But maybe finally arriving with the smallest job ever, for which we even did not have a building permit, as you can't get a building permit for it. But it's a second project we did for a client. The farm is to the left hand, you don't see it. But they had 5 daughters, and at a certain moment they found it time to inhabit their daughters into the stable at the back side of the garden. So this is it. If you want to review some things, we like making books. This is the catalogue of our passage at the Venice Biennale in the Belgian pavilion last year. in which we were asked to show our ideas, but we showed projects of other people's to illustrate our ideas. This 2G no one can buy, as it has never been printed, and you only can see it digitally, and then it's wrongly digitally connecting pages. But the Idebus, which is in blue and not in white, as you can see, by Kwart Verlag. Then the 3 books that has been mentioned, the picture is appearing again. One book one, one book 2, and one book 3. The first monographs we edited ourselves. And now we are hopefully delivering in September one book 4, one book 5, and one book 6, which are regarding the exhibition we held at ETH in Zurich 2 years ago. Coming up with new work, new drawings, sharing ideas, and finally arriving today with the latest monograph ANU had made on our work. You can ship it already, I believe. That's it.
If you don't mind, if anyone wants to ask you anything, it's possible.
Mostly people are devastated after this.
Do they let you take decisions on site? Can you change things on site? Can you improvise on site? Or do you draw all these details in advance in your construction?
We draw everything very precisely ahead of, and then we say with a small irony when we are finished after this hard labor of drawing everything, at least now we know what we change later on.
But is that possible in Belgium to take decisions on site?
Well, when we were making in the beginning the small project, everyone was always saying to us, we are curious when your scale got larger. So I think the first larger scale was Les Balais de la Baie, and you can't believe what we changed throughout, although it's a public tendering. It was a way of finding with contractors to talk about things and to try to find profits for everyone when you change something. So I think changing in public tendering is of course not only about thinking in an architectural way of the change, but also understanding all the mechanisms of economy, juridical things and all this kind. And I'm always really interested in that game. Like with the red trace, honestly, I first launched it as a small irony on that site, and within like few seconds everyone was with me. So it's of course, you understand what could have happened at that time. But you cannot change if you don't have anything to change. If you don't have details, if you don't have ideas on how you want to proceed with a project, you can't change anything. So I think that's also not for yourself, but for the client. They know what's going to change, what's going to be the next step, or what could happen along the whole story. So to me, that is, something which is still, we are used to do more and more and more, looking for those moments to find. But it's next, like now in Charleroi, where we now even we are finalizing the documents for the tendering, and we went, when we were drawing the details, we went back through all the details to avoid details. We really made research on how should engineers connect a column to the beam without architects thinking about it. And we really went back to formulating details of much, you could say, hey, couldn't an architect look at it to make them better? But if you look at them a second time, you say, yeah, but they are damn good as they would be constructed, just constructively wise. So I'm curious there if we can then at the building site see what happens and how this will work. I can guess that the contractor might come back with his way of connecting things, but maybe now we are mentally already prepared to say like, yeah, let's do it. Let's not stay with this condition of how we would like to see arrive things. And this has to do in that case with, I think, a scale of 60,000 square meters. It's not that I'm pessimistic, but I would say it doesn't matter still. What matters is that we make that huge movement of cutting a building of 80 meters open and so on. So I'm interested in this process of changing things. And it's not only about details or materializations. It is like the photo I showed here, honestly, this one. When we took away the floor, it was a starting moment because we wanted to open that window there above. What was the point? When you see the guy standing, he's standing in the original entrance corridor of the house, which is quite small. And our client, who wants to have a shop over there on 3 levels, said like, this is too small to receive the people shopping in my shop. And he wanted to have a new entrance, so honestly, I still like it, the proposal we did with a staircase that went through this space. But then, on the other hand, we were like thinking, what will happen if we take away the floor? That moment, maybe we can try to talk. And we didn't have to talk, because the client himself said like, what's this? See this? Yeah, we said, yeah, we understand. So, I mean, it's not, in that case, it's not about details and material. It's also about picking up, all of a sudden seeing things. We as architects, we can see a lot of things ahead. But even still, then sometimes we meet things we could not provide. But in this case, we saw it ahead. But sometimes you cannot explain it to your client till the moment there is. At this moment, I'm working in Bruges, which is a very old city, in the very center of Bruges, which is very under monumental services, in a house in which we discover constantly things. What we are making right now is totally away from the building permit, just as you discover things. And the house had nice discoveries and had also very bad discoveries. And this is, to me, like the most enjoyable time of my life to get along with things. I think that is, to me, when Inge and you and I started in the beginning, unless all what happens now to us, like this publishing, like this lecturing, like teaching and all this stuff, still it's this making which is our main leitmotif throughout the office. And this making goes from drawing by hand. I didn't took too much, even not any picture in it. I could make a new lecture with drawings, but I wanted to show projects. And then, drawing in the sand on the building site, redrawing the things. It's just still, I believe, and I think that's maybe the most important value. I think we have to have a certain pleasure in what we do, because what we do should cope with life and not with the object of architecture.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.